Lorenzo Santoro's jaw tightened as the Russian across the table leaned back, a predatory smile stretching across his scarred face. The words pouring from Viktor Klav's mouth were completely unintelligible. A rapid-fire stream of Russian that could signify a lucrative business deal or a brutal death sentence. Lorenzo's most trusted interpreter had unexpectedly collapsed just an hour before, having been rushed to the hospital with a suspected case of poisoning. Now, here he was, sitting in this secluded room at Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, surrounded by 6 heavily armed Russians and only 3 of his own men. Lorenzo felt a chilling premonition crawl down his spine. "He's insulting your mother?" Kosov's lieutenant said with a grin, his English broken and heavily accented. "Or maybe he's offering you tea. It's hard to tell, really." Lorenzo's hand stealthily moved toward the gun concealed beneath his jacket. This meeting was supposed to be a negotiation concerning the docks, neutral territory, a place for civilized conversation. But now, without understanding a single word being said, he felt as though he was flying blind. One wrong move, one misinterpreted gesture, and this room would erupt into a full-blown bloodbath. The door to the private dining room suddenly swung open, breaking the tension. Lorenzo's head snapped toward the intrusion, his gun halfway drawn. But instead of facing a threat, he saw a maid. A black woman in a simple gray uniform, her natural curls neatly pulled back, carrying a tray of water glasses. Her dark eyes met his for the briefest of moments, and he noticed something flicker there. Recognition, perhaps even a warning. She moved toward the table with a quiet grace, and then, impossibly, she spoke in perfect, fluid Russian. What exactly did the maid say that caused the entire room to fall silent? And why would a simple cleaning woman possess the knowledge of the language that could either save or end Lorenzo Santoro's life? Keep watching to discover the secret that would change everything. 3 hours earlier, Nyla Thompson had been on her knees, diligently scrubbing the marble floor of the restaurant's lobby, trying her best to ignore the ache in her lower back and the persistent buzzing of her cell phone in her pocket. Rent was due in just 5 days, and she was still $200 short. The text from her landlord had been crystal clear. Pay on time or find somewhere else to live. Nyla, private dining room 3 needs a complete setup, the message read. 20 minutes. She pushed herself up with a sigh, grabbing her cleaning cart. At 26, she'd always imagined her life would look drastically different. She'd earned a degree in international relations from a state school and was fluent in 4 languages, all with grand dreams of working at the UN or the State Department. But all of those dreams had come crashing down when her mother's cancer diagnosis had drained every penny she had, forcing Nyla to drop out of school in her final semester. That was 3 years ago. Her mother was gone now, and Nyla was still cleaning floors to make ends meet. The private dining room was opulent, boasting floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the breathtaking Manhattan skyline, a table large enough to seat 20 people, and crystal chandeliers that sparkled in the afternoon light. Nyla worked quickly, her practiced hands swiftly arranging place settings, meticulously checking the temperature controls, and ensuring every detail was perfect. This was supposed to be a high-profile meeting, the kind where powerful men in expensive suits made decisions that affected the lives of thousands of people. She was just adjusting the final centerpiece when she overheard 2 waiters talking in the hallway. "Did you hear?" one of them asked. Santoro's interpreter just collapsed. An ambulance had to take him away. The other one responded, "Santoro, as in Lorenzo Santoro, the one and only? Word is someone might have poisoned the guy. This meeting with the Russians is going to be a total disaster." Nyla froze. Lorenzo Santoro. She knew that name. Everyone in certain circles knew that name. The youngest Don in New York's Italian Mafia. A man who had consolidated power through a combination of strategic brilliance and ruthless violence. And the Russians, that meant Viktor Kosov, probably the Bratva boss trying to negotiate territory in the Northeast. This was exactly the kind of high-stakes international negotiation her professors had discussed in her diplomatic relations classes, except this one would be conducted with guns and threats instead of policy papers and reasoned debate. She should just walk away, clock out early, go home, and pretend she hadn't heard anything. But something made her pause. Maybe it was the memory of her mother telling her that her natural gift for languages was meant for something far greater than simply translating medicine labels. Maybe it was the reckless side of her personality, the part that had always existed just beneath the surface of her practical, hard-working exterior. Or maybe it was just that she was tired of being invisible, of being overlooked and underestimated. The meeting was scheduled to start at 6 p.m. By 5:30, Nyla watched from the hallway as serious men in dark suits began to arrive. She recognized Lorenzo Santoro instantly, not from the grainy photos she'd seen online, which never quite captured the true essence of him, but from the way every single person in his vicinity seemed to orbit around him like planets around the sun. He was tall and lean, with the kind of physique that suggested he carried violence with a certain elegance. His dark hair was swept back, and his eyes missed absolutely nothing. He wore his power like a second skin. The Russians arrived 10 minutes later. More suits, even harder faces, and eyes that had seen far too much. At exactly 6 p.m., the door to the dining room closed. Nyla continued her work nearby, cleaning spaces that were already spotless, her heart pounding against her ribs. This was completely insane. She should definitely leave. Instead, she moved closer to the door. The voices inside were tense and strained. Italian, English, and Russian all mixed together in a linguistic soup that would confuse anyone not trained to separate the threads. She could hear Lorenzo's voice, smooth and controlled, as he attempted to navigate the conversation. But then the English stopped, the Italian stopped. Only Russian remained, rapid and aggressive. Someone laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. Nyla's hand moved to the door handle before her brain could even catch up with the decision she was making. She grabbed a tray of water glasses from a nearby service station, took a deep breath, and walked inside. The room fell silent as she entered. 7 faces turned toward her, some annoyed, some curious. One pair of dark eyes looked at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. Lorenzo Santoro was staring at her like she was a complex puzzle he couldn't quite solve. She moved forward with the practiced invisibility of service workers everywhere, setting down glasses, her hands remaining steady even as her pulse raced. The Russians began talking again, their attention dismissing her as irrelevant, but Lorenzo was still watching her. She seized her opportunity. As she set a glass near Viktor Kosov, she spoke softly in Russian, her accent flawless, a skill honed during a semester abroad in Moscow. He's lying about the dock shares. He's already negotiated with the Albanians for the northern ports. This is just a distraction while his men move on your territory in Brooklyn. Every single person in the room went absolutely still. Klov's face transformed from smug confidence to shocked fury in the span of a heartbeat. He barked something in Russian, a demand to know who she was, how she knew, and whether she was even telling the truth. Nyla kept her expression neutral, her voice calm as she responded in Russian, "I'm no one important, just someone who listens." She continued, "The Albanian deal was finalized yesterday at the Vissla restaurant on 2nd Avenue. The contract was signed over borscht." Lorenzo Santoro rose slowly from his chair, his movement as controlled and dangerous as a predator deciding whether or not to strike. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, which somehow made it even more terrifying. "You speak Russian." It wasn't a question. His English was lightly accented, cultured, the voice of a man educated far beyond the streets that had made him who he was. "Yes," Nyla said simply, switching to English. Her eyes met his, and she saw the exact moment his mind began calculating possibilities, how to use her, whether or not to trust her, and what she might cost him. "And Italian?" he asked, testing her. "Si," she responded. "Francese ancia, Araba, Sinese." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or interest, but it was gone too quickly to name. Klov slammed his hand on the table, erupting in a stream of Russian cursing. Nyla translated calmly, though she edited out some of the more colorful insults about Lorenzo's heritage. "He wants to know if what I said is true. He's threatening to walk out and consider this a declaration of war." Lorenzo's gaze never left her face. "Tell him," he said slowly, That I had no knowledge of any Albanian deal. Tell him I want to verify this information before we continue. Tell him. He paused, and Nyla saw the strategic mind working behind those dark eyes. Tell him that if what you say is true, I'll hand over the person responsible and give Kossoff the Brooklyn territory as compensation for the betrayal. Nyla translated. The room erupted in rapid Russian, Kossoff conferring with his men, making phone calls and barking orders. Nyla stood perfectly still, translating when asked, invisible when not needed, her mind racing through the implications of what she'd just done. 20 minutes later, Kossoff received a phone call that confirmed everything she'd said. His face went through several interesting color changes before he turned to Lorenzo and spoke. This time, Nyla translated a grudging admission that Lorenzo was not responsible and a demand for the promised compensation. The meeting concluded with a tense but functional agreement. As the Russians filed out, Lorenzo Santoro remained seated, his attention fixed entirely on Nyla. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nyla Thompson. And you're a maid here?" "I clean whatever needs cleaning." He stood, moving toward her with the controlled grace of someone who'd been trained to move efficiently and lethally. He stopped close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "You just prevented a war," he said quietly. "You saved my life, probably. Definitely saved my business. Do you understand what that means?" Nyla lifted her chin, meeting his gaze despite every instinct screaming at her to look away. "It means I should probably ask for a raise." The corner of his mouth twitched, the smallest hint of a smile quickly suppressed. "You're coming with me." It wasn't a request. "Excuse me, I need an interpreter. Mine is in the hospital, possibly dying. You clearly have the skills. You're now employed by me." It wasn't a question or an offer. It was a statement of fact. "I don't work for the Mafia," Nyla said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You do now," Lorenzo replied. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call, and spoke rapid Italian. When he hung up, he looked at her again. "I just paid your rent for the next 6 months. Paid off your student loans, too. Consider it a signing bonus." Nyla's breath caught. "How do you?" "I know everything about everyone in this building. I own it. I also now know everything about you, Nyla Thompson. You have 5 minutes to collect your things. My car is waiting." He walked toward the door, then paused, looking back at her. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes made her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "And Nyla, if you try to run, I'll find you. Not to hurt you," he added, seeing her stiffen. "But I protect what's mine. And whether you've realized it yet or not, you just became mine." The door closed behind him, leaving Nyla standing alone in the opulent dining room, her entire world having shifted in the space of 30 minutes. Outside, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Manhattan skyline glittered with 1,000 lights. Somewhere in that vast city, she'd had a simple life, difficult, exhausting, but hers. That life had just ended. She didn't know yet whether to mourn it or celebrate it. Nyla had just gone from scrubbing floors to being claimed by the most dangerous man in New York. But what Lorenzo didn't know was that Nyla had secrets of her own. Secrets that could potentially destroy them both. Will she accept his protection or run from the world she just entered? Keep watching to find out what happens when Nyla enters Lorenzo's world. The SUV was black, bulletproof, and more luxurious than any vehicle Nyla had ever been inside. Lorenzo sat beside her in the back seat, speaking rapid Italian into his phone while the city streamed past the tinted windows. She caught enough words to understand he was investigating who had betrayed him with the Albanians, and that someone would pay severely for it. When he finally ended the call, he turned to her with an assessing gaze that made her feel simultaneously exposed and electrified. "Tell me about yourself, everything. You said you already know everything about me." He paused. "I know facts. I want to hear your version." Nyla considered lying, keeping the careful walls she'd built over the past 3 years firmly in place. But something about the intensity of his attention made her choose truth instead. "My mother died 3 years ago. Cancer. I dropped out of school to take care of her. Used every penny I had and then some. After she passed, I took whatever work I could find. Cleaning pays the bills. She paused. I studied international relations. I was going to change the world. Instead, I scrubbed toilets. You speak 4 languages fluently. That's not a small thing. He paused before continuing. It's also not worth much when you're $20,000 in debt and have no degree to show for it. Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was softer. My mother died when I was 16. She was a schoolteacher. She wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer, something respectable. Instead, I became this. He gestured at himself, at the SUV, at the armed driver in front. Sometimes I wonder what she would think. The vulnerability in his words surprised her. This was not the ruthless mafia boss she'd expected. Or rather, he was that, but he was also something more complicated. Where are we going? Nyla asked. My home. You'll stay there in the guest wing. I need you close, available whenever diplomatic situations arise, and they will arise constantly. The life I lead requires constant negotiation with people who speak a dozen different languages. Nyla said, You can't just kidnap me. I'm not kidnapping you, he replied. You're free to leave whenever you want. His eyes met hers. But the moment you walk out that door, you lose my protection. And Klav's men saw you tonight. They know you speak Russian, know you have information. They'll wonder what else you know, what else you might have heard. They'll come looking for you. Nyla's stomach tightened. She hadn't thought of that. Of course, she hadn't. She'd been too busy reacting, too caught up in the moment to consider the consequences. So, it's not really a choice, she said quietly. Everything is a choice, Nyla. Some choices just have better outcomes than others. The SUV turned into an underground garage beneath a building in Tribeca, one of those converted warehouses that now housed multi-million-dollar lofts. They took a private elevator that required both a key and a thumbprint, rising past floor after floor until they reached the penthouse. When the doors opened, Nyla stepped into a space that redefined luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. The interior was modern and minimalist, with clean lines and expensive materials: marble, dark wood, brushed steel. Art that was probably worth more than she'd earn in a lifetime hung on the walls. The guest wing is through there, Lorenzo said, gesturing to a hallway. 3 bedrooms, private bathroom, sitting room. Choose whichever room you prefer. I'll have your things brought from your apartment tomorrow. I didn't agree to this. No, he acknowledged. But you will, because despite the fear I see in your eyes, I also see curiosity. You want to know what this life is like. You want to use those languages you've worked so hard to master. He paused before continuing. And maybe, just a little, you want to know me. He was standing close enough now that she could see the faint scar along his jawline, the gold flecks in his brown eyes, and the way his lips curved when he was amused by something. You're very sure of yourself, Nyla said. I have to be. Doubt gets you killed in my world. He reached out and she tensed, but he only tucked a curl that had escaped her ponytail behind her ear. The gesture was surprisingly gentle. Get some rest. Tomorrow you start your new job. I promise it will be more interesting than scrubbing floors. He walked away, disappearing into another wing of the massive penthouse, leaving Nyla standing alone in a space that cost more per month than she'd made in the past year. She explored the guest wing carefully, still half expecting this to be some elaborate trap. But the rooms were exactly as advertised, beautifully furnished, stocked with toiletries and clothes in her exact size, which should have been creepy, but was somehow just efficient. She chose the room with the best view of the city and sat on the edge of the bed, her mind spinning. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern had been making rent. Now she was living in a penthouse with a mafia boss who looked at her like she was a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Sleep well. We have breakfast at 7. Don't be late, L. Despite everything, the insanity of the situation, the danger she'd walked into, the complete upheaval of her life, Nyla found herself smiling. The next morning, She found Lorenzo in the kitchen wearing fitted black pants and a white shirt rolled up to his elbows, cooking eggs with surprising competence. He looked different in the morning light, younger, less dangerous, almost normal. "You cook?" she asked. "I lived alone for years before I had staff. Besides, I don't trust anyone else to prepare my food. Poisoning is an occupational hazard." He plated the eggs with toast and fresh fruit. "Coffee, please," he requested. They ate in companionable silence, and Nyla found herself relaxing incrementally. Lorenzo seemed content to let her process everything, not pushing for conversation. "So, what exactly does being your interpreter involve?" she finally asked. "Meetings, negotiations, sometimes translations of documents or intercepted communications. You'll accompany me to most business engagements. Remain visible but quiet unless your skills are needed. You'll hear things, terrible things probably. You'll see the ugly side of what I do. Can you handle that?" "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I've never tried." "Fair enough." He studied her for a moment. "Tell me something, Nyla. Last night, how did you know about the Albanian deal?" She'd been expecting this question. "I didn't. Not exactly. But I overheard Kosov and his men talking while I was setting up the room earlier. They were speaking Russian, assuming no one could understand them. They mentioned someone named Dmitri making a side deal, laughed about how you didn't know. I just put the pieces together. That's either very clever or very lucky." He paused. "Can't it be both?" He laughed, an actual laugh that transformed his entire face. "I suppose it can. You're full of surprises, Nyla Thompson." His phone rang, interrupting the moment. He answered in Italian, his expression hardening as he listened. When he hung up, the dangerous man from the night before was back in full force. "We have a problem. The traitor who made the Albanian deal. It's my cousin, Marco," he said. "Family?" The word tasting bitter on his tongue. "I need to deal with this, and I need you there to translate. Marco's wife is Greek, barely speaks English or Italian. This is going to be ugly. What are you going to do to him?" Lorenzo's eyes met hers, and she saw no mercy there. "What I have to do. This is my world, Nyla. Are you sure you want to be part of it?" She thought of her mother, who had taught her that strength meant standing up, even when you were terrified. She thought of her apartment with its broken heater and the landlord's threatening texts. She thought of Lorenzo's gentle touch the night before, tucking hair behind her ear like she was something precious. "I'm sure," she said, though she wasn't sure at all. "Then get dressed. We leave in 20 minutes. And Nyla," he paused at the kitchen doorway. "Thank you for last night, for this morning, for not running when you had the chance." "The day is not over yet," she replied. He smiled, that dangerous smile that made her pulse quicken. "No, it's not." The warehouse in Queens was exactly what Nyla expected from a Mafia confrontation location. Abandoned, industrial, and vaguely threatening. Lorenzo's men were already there, along with Marco, a man in his 30s with the same dark eyes as Lorenzo, but none of the same presence. He looked terrified, as well he should be. Marco's wife, Eleni, was also there, crying and pleading in rapid Greek. Lorenzo gestured for Nyla to approach. "What is she saying?" Nyla listened, her heart aching for the woman's desperation. "She says they have 2 children. She says Marco made a mistake, that the Albanians threaten their family. She's begging you to show mercy, to remember that you and Marco grew up together." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He spoke to Marco in Italian. Nyla understood enough to know he was detailing the betrayal, the consequences, and the fact that being family made this worse, not better. Then he switched to English, looking at Nyla. "Tell Eleni that I will spare Marco's life because of their children. But he's exiled. They leave New York tonight, never to return. Tell her I'm seizing all their assets to compensate for the damage. Tell her they should be grateful I'm this merciful, because anyone else in my position would have already put a bullet in Marco's head." Nyla translated, softening the words just slightly, trying to convey both the threat and the mercy. Eleni collapsed in relief, sobbing her thanks. As they walked back to the SUV, Lorenzo was quiet. Nyla could see the tension in his shoulders, the weight of the decision he'd just made. "You hate this," she said softly. "The violence, the fear, having to hurt people you care about." "Yes," he admitted. "But I do it anyway because if I show weakness, if I hesitate, everything I've built falls apart and a lot more people get hurt. So, you hurt a few to protect the many." He paused. "Something like that. It's a terrible calculus, but it's the only one I have." They climbed into the SUV, and as the driver pulled away, Lorenzo reached over and took her hand. A gesture so unexpected that Nyla almost pulled away, but she didn't. Instead, she squeezed his fingers, offering comfort the only way she could. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for seeing me, not just the monster but the man beneath." "You're not a monster, Lorenzo. I'm not a good man either." "Maybe not," Nyla agreed. "But you're trying to be, so I think that counts for something." He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between hope, longing, and fear. Then the moment passed, and he released her hand, the walls coming back up. But Nyla had seen beneath them, and she knew with a certainty that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure, that everything had just changed between them. Nyla had just seen the darkest side of Lorenzo's world, but instead of running, she offered him comfort. As their connection deepens, the secrets they're both hiding are about to collide in ways neither of them expects. What will happen when Lorenzo discovers that Nyla isn't just a maid who speaks Russian? Keep watching to find out what happens next. Over the subsequent 3 weeks, Nyla acclimated to her new existence with surprising ease. She accompanied Lorenzo to various meetings with Russian Bratva members, Chinese Triad representatives, Colombian cartel leaders, and legitimate businessmen who were only marginally less perilous. Her linguistic abilities proved indispensable, and she began to grasp the complex network of alliances and rivalries that Lorenzo navigated on a daily basis. But beyond that, she started to comprehend Lorenzo himself on a deeper level. She discovered that he made anonymous donations to cancer research in his deceased mother's honor, that he shielded businesses within his territory from other predatory entities, thereby establishing a peculiar form of order amidst the chaos. She also learned that he immersed himself in philosophy books during the evenings and possessed a remarkable talent for playing the piano, a skill he only indulged in when he believed he was unobserved. She further discovered that his favorite dish was his mother's risotto recipe, a culinary masterpiece he had never been able to replicate successfully. He was also prone to nightmares, often waking in the dark hours before dawn, his mind plagued by unseen torments. Moreover, she noticed that he gazed at her with an intensity that made her feel like the most significant person in his entire world, and she gradually realized that she was falling for him, dangerously and irrevocably, despite every rational objection her mind could conjure. They were careful not to overstep certain boundaries. Lorenzo never physically touched her beyond the occasional fleeting brush of hands or a protective arm when they found themselves in hazardous situations. However, the unspoken tension between them intensified with each passing day, becoming a palpable entity that seemed to throb in the atmosphere whenever they shared the same space. It was during a late evening that everything took a drastic turn. Nyla was in Lorenzo's study, diligently translating a document from Mandarin when his phone disrupted the silence. She overheard him answering in Italian, followed by a sharp intake of breath, and a swift transformation in his tone, shifting from casual to deadly serious. As he concluded the call, his face appeared ashen. "What's wrong?" Nyla inquired, her senses immediately heightened. "That was my contact within the FBI. They have obtained intelligence suggesting that Kossoff is plotting something. A major offensive against my operations, possibly even a direct assault." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had never witnessed before, revealing that he was genuinely shaken. "There's more," he continued. "They discovered evidence indicating that someone close to me is leaking information to Kossoff, a mole embedded within my organization." Nyla's stomach plummeted. "Do they know who it is?" she asked. "No, but they are aware that it is someone with access to high-level meetings. Someone who possesses proficiency in multiple languages. Someone who has been present at every major negotiation over the past few weeks." His eyes locked onto hers, and in that instant, she saw the precise moment he made a horrifying realization. Someone like you. The accusation lingered in the air between them, as sharp as a finely honed blade. You think I'm the mole? Nyla asked, her voice barely audible above a whisper. I don't want to think it, but the timeline aligns perfectly. You materialized out of nowhere, impossibly qualified, precisely when I needed you the most. You rescued me from Kossoff, which could have been a calculated maneuver to gain my trust. You have been present at every meeting since then. He rose to his feet and began pacing restlessly, his movements restrained with barely suppressed fury. Tell me I'm wrong, Nyla. Tell me I'm being paranoid. She should have confessed the truth then. She should have explained everything. But fear constricted her throat, rendering her incapable of uttering the words. Instead, she retorted, You're wrong. I'm not working for Kossoff or anyone else. I have been loyal to you. Then prove it, he challenged. Allow me to search your room, your phone, your computer. No. The word escaped her lips with more force than she intended. I'm not one of your soldiers, Lorenzo. I am not going to subject myself to interrogation simply because you are paranoid. Either you trust me or you don't. Trust is a luxury I cannot afford. Then we have nothing more to say to each other. She turned to leave, but Lorenzo moved with astonishing speed, faster than she anticipated, effectively blocking her path to the door. They stood mere inches apart, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, a volatile mixture of anger and something else, something undeniably potent, crackling between them. Don't walk away from me, he said softly, his voice laced with a barely controlled intensity. Not now. Not when there are individuals who seek to harm you solely because of your association with me. Then stop treating me as if I am one of them. I can't, he confessed, his voice strained with a mixture of frustration and vulnerability. Don't you understand? I can't afford to trust anyone, especially not. He abruptly cut himself short, but she heard the unspoken words hanging in the air. Especially not someone you care about, she finished softly, her voice barely a whisper. The muscle in his jaw twitched imperceptibly. Yes, Lorenzo. She reached out, gently placing her palm against his cheek, feeling the coarse stubble beneath her fingertips. I am not betraying you. I swear it on my mother's memory. I swear it on everything I hold dear. You have to believe me. For what seemed like an eternity, he simply gazed at her, his expression unreadable. Then, he covered her hand with his, turning his face to press a tender kiss into her palm, a gesture so intimate that it momentarily stole her breath away. I want to believe you, he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. God, Nyla, I want to believe you more than anything, because if you're lying to me, if you're secretly working with Kossoff, it will devastate me. Not because of the business, I can recover from that, but because I've allowed you into my inner circle. I've revealed to you who I truly am, beneath all of this facade, and that's something I've never done before. I'm not lying, she declared, even as a nagging sense of guilt gnawed at her conscience. She wasn't lying about working directly for Kossoff, but she was concealing another truth, a truth that could potentially be just as destructive. Lorenzo drew her closer, resting his forehead against hers. Then help me, he pleaded. Help me uncover who is truly betraying me. Work with me not just for me. Be my partner in this. Okay? She breathed, her voice filled with a mix of trepidation and resolve. Okay. He kissed her then, finally and inevitably. It was nothing like the tender, chaste kisses depicted in romantic movies. This kiss was charged with desperation, fueled by an insatiable hunger. 3 weeks of pent-up tension erupted in a torrent of heat and raw desire. Nyla reciprocated with equal fervor, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body pressing against his with an unrestrained intensity. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for air, Lorenzo gazed at her with an expression bordering on awe. This is a terrible idea, he said, his voice laced with a hint of self-awareness. The worst. She nodded in agreement. You could get killed just being close to me. I know. And I'm probably going to break your heart. Too late. You already have access to it. He laughed, that rare, genuine laugh that she had come to cherish. Then he kissed her again, softer this time, with a tenderness that stirred a deep ache within her chest. They spent the remainder of the night in his study, meticulously combing through files and communications, searching for any trace of the elusive mole. Nyla worked with a focused intensity, desperately trying to silence the nagging voice in her head that accused her of hypocrisy. She wasn't actively working for Kossoff. That much was true. However, she harbored her own secrets, her own compelling reasons for being precisely where she was. And if Lorenzo ever discovered the real motivation behind her deliberate entrance into that dining room 3 weeks prior, he would never be able to forgive her. It was nearly 3 a.m. when Nyla stumbled upon it. A subtle pattern in the communications, barely perceptible, but undeniably present. Someone was discreetly passing on information, but not directly to Kossoff. The information was being routed through a cutout, an intermediary. "Lorenzo, look at this," she said urgently. He moved to stand behind her chair, peering over her shoulder at the screen. She could feel the warmth emanating from his body, smell the intoxicating scent of his cologne, and it required a considerable effort to maintain her focus on the data. "These messages," she explained, "they're all being sent to the same email address, but it's routed through several different servers. Someone within your organization is definitely leaking information, but the timing is peculiar. Notice the messages are only sent when we are planning something defensive, never offensive. It's as if whoever this is wants to prevent casualties, not cause them." Lorenzo frowned, leaning closer to scrutinize the screen. "You're right. That's unusual. If this were a standard betrayal, they would be selling information about our vulnerabilities, our offenses, our profits. This is different. Is there anyone within your organization who might have a personal reason to prevent violence?" Nyla asked thoughtfully. "Someone with family involved in rival organizations, perhaps?" Lorenzo's body went rigid. Then he cursed softly in Italian. "What?" Nyla inquired, her curiosity piqued. "My head of security, Giorgio. His sister married into the Kloof organization 3 years ago." "But Giorgio is loyal," Nyla pointed out. "He's been with you for 10 years. He saved your life twice. Maybe that's precisely why he's doing this," Nyla said slowly, carefully choosing her words. "Not to betray you, but to protect both sides. To prevent an all-out war that would devastate both families." Lorenzo retrieved his phone and placed a call. After 5 minutes of rapid-fire Italian, he ended the call with a grim expression. "You're right," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "Giorgio just confessed everything. He's been attempting to act as a back-channel mediator, preventing the worst escalations on both sides. He thought he was helping." "Was he?" Nyla asked. "Maybe. Or maybe he just made everything more complicated." Lorenzo sighed, the weight of leadership pressing heavily upon his shoulders. "I'll have to relieve him of his position. I can't have someone operating outside the chain of command, even with good intentions. But I won't kill him. That's something, at least." He turned to face Nyla, and the exhaustion etched on his face made him appear younger, more vulnerable. "Thank you for this," he said sincerely, "for believing in me enough to help." "Always," she replied, meaning it more profoundly than he could ever comprehend. He extended his hand towards her. "Come on, it's late. Let's get some rest." She took his hand, allowing him to lead her through the quiet penthouse. But instead of leaving her at the guest wing, he gently pulled her towards his own bedroom. "Stay with me tonight?" he asked, his voice laced with a plea for comfort. "Just stay. I don't want to be alone." It wasn't an overt seduction. It was something more genuine than that. A deep-seated need for solace, for connection, for the comforting presence of someone he trusted during the darkest hours of the night. "Okay?" Nyla whispered, her heart filled with a mixture of compassion and trepidation. They lay together in his bed, fully clothed, her head resting on his chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittered with a myriad of lights, each one representing countless lives being lived, decisions being made, secrets being kept. "Nyla," Lorenzo murmured in the darkness, his voice soft and intimate. "Yes, I'm falling in love with you. I thought you should know in case everything goes to hell tomorrow." Her breath caught in her throat. "Lorenzo, you don't have to say anything. Just know that whatever happens." She should have confessed everything then, revealed the truth that she had been desperately trying to conceal. But instead, she simply held him tighter and whispered, "I'm falling in love with you too." It was true. It was also the most perilous truth she had ever uttered. Because Lorenzo was unaware that Nyla Thompson possessed another name, another identity, another reason for being in that restaurant on the fateful night she saved his life. And when he ultimately discovered the truth, when the deception finally came to light, it would shatter everything they had so painstakingly built. Just as Lorenzo and Nyla had finally acknowledged their feelings for each other, the secrets that stood between them were poised to erupt in the most devastating way imaginable. What was Nyla truly hiding? And what would Lorenzo do when he finally unearthed the truth? The final confrontation was rapidly approaching. Keep watching to see if their love could possibly withstand the revelation that would irrevocably alter everything. The next morning, Nyla awoke to find Lorenzo already awake, watching her with an expression that she couldn't quite decipher. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting the room in warm shades of gold. "Hi," she murmured sleepily. "Hi yourself." He gently brushed a stray curl away from her face. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "That sounds dangerous." He managed a weak smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I need to tell you something about why I'm so paranoid about moles and betrayals." Nyla's stomach tightened with apprehension, but she nodded silently, indicating that she was ready to listen. 3 years ago, I was briefly married. Her name was Sophia. Lorenzo's voice remained carefully controlled, but she could detect the underlying pain that lingered beneath the surface. She was beautiful, intelligent, from a good family. We had a whirlwind romance and got married after only 6 months. I truly believed that I had found my life partner. "What happened?" Nyla asked softly, her voice filled with empathy. She was an undercover FBI agent. The entire relationship was a carefully orchestrated operation designed to get close to me and gather incriminating evidence. When I found out, he paused, his jaw clenched tightly. It nearly destroyed me. Not just the betrayal itself, but the agonizing realization that everything I had felt, everything I believed to be real, was nothing more than a fabricated act, a carefully constructed performance. Nyla's blood ran cold. "Lorenzo, I'm telling you this because I need you to understand why I am the way I am, why trust is so difficult for me, why the mere thought that you might be lying to me terrifies me more than any bullet or bomb." His eyes met hers, his gaze filled with a mixture of vulnerability and unwavering honesty. "But I choose to trust you anyway, even if it's foolish, even if it breaks me again, because what I feel for you is real, and I'm tired of living in constant fear." The weight of her guilt pressed down on Nyla's chest, crushing her lungs. This was her moment. She had to confess everything. "Lorenzo, I need to tell you something." His phone suddenly rang, emitting an emergency tone that prompted him to answer immediately. She watched his expression transform in a matter of seconds, the tenderness vanishing, replaced by a look of cold, terrifying resolve. "When? How many? Where's my team?" He was already in motion, hastily pulling on his clothes. All traces of the vulnerable man from moments before were instantly replaced by the ruthless and decisive leader that Nyla had come to know. "We're under attack," he said tersely. "Multiple locations. Kossoff is making his move now while we're distracted." "What can I do?" Nyla asked, already on her feet, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Stay here, behind the reinforced walls. My men will—" "No, I'm coming with you. You need me." When he began to protest, she cut him off firmly. "You'll need a translator, and I refuse to sit here idly while you walk into danger. We're partners, remember? You said it yourself." For a fleeting moment, He looked as if he wanted to argue, but then he nodded sharply. Fine, but you stay behind me at all times. You don't take any unnecessary risks. Understood? Understood. The ride to the warehouse district was fraught with tension, Lorenzo coordinating his forces through a series of rapid-fire phone calls. Nyla listened attentively, translating vital information from his Russian contacts as they called in with updates. It became increasingly clear that Kossoff was launching a major offensive, hitting multiple fronts simultaneously in an attempt to overwhelm Lorenzo's defenses. Upon their arrival at the main flashpoint, a sprawling shipping warehouse that served as the nerve center of Lorenzo's operations, they were met with a scene of utter chaos. Gunfire echoed throughout the cavernous metal structure, men shouted orders in multiple languages, and thick smoke billowed from a small fire, obscuring sections of the space. Lorenzo moved through the pandemonium with the effortless authority of a seasoned general commanding his troops, issuing quick, decisive orders to direct his forces. Nyla remained close by his side, translating urgent messages from the Russian-speaking combatants and helping Lorenzo to understand the ever-evolving tactical situation. Then, she spotted him, Viktor Kossoff himself, standing on a catwalk overlooking the warehouse floor, surrounded by his loyal guards. "Lorenzo there," she exclaimed, pointing towards Kossoff's position. Kossoff simultaneously noticed them. At that very moment, he shouted an order in Russian, instructing his men to open fire upon them. Lorenzo instinctively shoved Nyla behind a sturdy steel support column as bullets ricocheted off the surrounding metal with deafening pings. "Tell him I want to talk," Lorenzo shouted over the relentless gunfire. "Tell him we can end this senseless bloodshed without any further loss of life." Nyla shouted the translation in Russian, her voice somehow managing to carry through the deafening din of the battle. Kossoff responded with a derisive laugh and a string of Russian words that she didn't even need to translate. His violent intentions were abundantly clear. But then, Kossoff said something else, something that caused Nyla's blood to freeze in her veins. He was looking directly at her when he uttered the words. Lorenzo immediately noticed her reaction. What? What did he say? She couldn't bring herself to form the words, unable to believe that this was happening now, in the worst possible way imaginable. Kossoff shouted again, this time in broken English, clearly intending for Lorenzo to understand his words. "Ask your translator about her father. Ask her about Ivan Vulov." Lorenzo turned to face her, confusion and the first hints of betrayal dawning in his eyes. "What is he talking about?" "Lorenzo, I can explain." "What is he talking about, Nyla?" She met his gaze, seeing her own heartbreak reflected back at her. "My father, his name was Ivan Vulov. He was Kossoff's nephew. He died 5 years ago in a territorial dispute with the Italian families." "Your families?" Lorenzo took a step backward, as if she had physically struck him. "Your bratva, your Russian mafia my father died before I could really become a part of that world. My mother took me away, changed our names and tried to give me a normal life. But when she got sick, when I desperately needed money, Kossoff found me. He offered to help if I would get close to you and gather information." "So, everything was a lie?" Lorenzo's voice was flat and devoid of emotion, which was somehow more devastating than any display of anger would have been. "The cleaning job, the convenient timing, saving me from Kossoff that first night, all of it was a setup. No, I mean yes, initially, but Lorenzo, I never gave Kossoff anything of value. I refused. That first night, when I warned you about the Albanian deal, that wasn't part of any plan. That was me choosing you over him. And every day since then, I've been choosing you. Why should I believe anything you say? Because I'm telling you now. I could have continued lying, could have let you find out some other way. But another burst of gunfire abruptly interrupted them. One of Lorenzo's men shouted a warning, indicating that Kossoff's forces were advancing. Lorenzo's face was a mask of controlled fury as he turned away from her. "Stay here. Don't move. We'll deal with this after I handle Kossoff." "Lorenzo, please." But he was already gone, moving towards the heart of the firefight with a cold, focused determination. Nyla watched him go, her heart shattering into a million pieces. Then, she looked up at Kossoff on the catwalk, saw the smug, satisfied smile plastered across his face, and something inside her snapped. He had orchestrated this. He had meticulously planned this confrontation, revealed her secret in the most destructive way possible, all in an attempt to destroy what she and Lorenzo had built together. She wasn't going to let him win. Making a decision that was either incredibly brave or appallingly suicidal, Nyla stepped out from behind cover. She shouted in Russian, her voice cutting through the din of the warehouse, instantly drawing every eye towards her. "Viktor Kossoff, you want to talk about my father? Then let's talk about how you orchestrated his death, how you sent him into a territorial dispute without adequate backup, without proper intelligence, because you wanted to expand your territory, and you didn't care who died in the process." The warehouse fell eerily silent. Even the relentless gunfire momentarily ceased as everyone turned to witness what would happen next. Kossoff's face darkened with fury. "You have no idea what you're talking about, girl. I have every idea. I found my father's journal after he died. I read every entry. He knew you were setting him up. He knew it was a suicide mission, but he went anyway because that's what family does in your world. They die for your ambition." She was now fully exposed, standing in the open space between the two warring factions. She could feel Lorenzo's eyes fixed upon her, could sense his men wanting to pull her back to safety, but she kept her focus firmly on Kossoff. "I'm done being a pawn in your twisted games. I'm done being used by men who see people as nothing more than chess pieces. You wanted me to spy on Lorenzo, to betray him. You failed because I chose him over you. I chose love over revenge. I chose to be better than this endless cycle of violence and betrayal. You're a traitor to your own blood," Kossoff roared, his voice filled with rage. "No," Nyla replied quietly, her voice filled with a newfound sense of resolve. "I'm finally honoring it. My father wanted out of this life. He wanted a better future for me. He died trying to give me that choice. So I'm making it now. I'm done with the Bratva. I'm done with you." Kossoff raised his gun, aiming directly at her. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Nyla saw Lorenzo moving towards her, saw the desperate calculation in his eyes. He wouldn't reach her in time. She braced herself for the impact, but the shot didn't come from Kossoff's gun. It came from behind him. One of Kossoff's own men, a younger soldier with haunted eyes, had fired the shot. Kossoff stumbled, blood blooming on his shoulder. Shock etched across his face. The young soldier spoke in Russian, his voice carrying through the warehouse. "Enough! Ivan was my friend. He was a good man. You killed him. All this for what? For territory, for money. No more." Chaos erupted as loyalties fractured. Half of Kossoff's men moved to protect their wounded boss, while the other half sided with the young soldier who had fired the shot. Lorenzo's forces seized the opportunity presented by the confusion to advance, and within minutes, the battle was effectively over. Kossoff was in custody, wounded but alive. His organization was fractured and leaderless, but Nyla barely registered any of it, because Lorenzo was standing directly in front of her, and the look on his face was breaking her heart all over again. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I should have told you sooner. I wanted to so many times, but I was afraid." "Of what?" "That I'd react exactly the way I did? That I'd feel betrayed and manipulated?" His voice was cold and controlled. "Yes, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But Lorenzo, please believe me when I say that what I feel for you is real. Everything between us, from that first night until now, my feelings have been genuine. How am I supposed to know what's real anymore?" He ran a hand through his hair, and she could see the exhaustion, the pain, and the desperate longing to believe her warring with the profound sense of betrayal that he was struggling to overcome. "So, you're Russian Mafia royalty, Nyla. Your father was Ivan Vulov, one of the most respected names in the Bratva. You could have had power, position, protection. Instead, you were cleaning floors and living in a rundown apartment. Why? Because I didn't want that life. Because my mother spent her last years trying to escape it, trying to give me a chance to be someone other than a criminal's daughter. Because I watched my father die for an organization that didn't care about him. And I refused to let that be my story, too. Then why agree to spy on me? Because Kossoff threatened to expose my identity to your enemies. And in the early days, when you were consolidating your power, that would have been a death sentence. He offered me protection if I worked for him. But from the moment I met you, I knew I couldn't go through with it. You weren't the monster I had been told to expect. You were complex and damaged and trying to be better, just like me. Lorenzo remained silent for a long moment, and Nyla held her breath, bracing herself for his judgment. Your father, he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. I remember that hit. I was 23, just taking over my family's operations. It was one of those territorial disputes that nearly triggered a full-scale war. We lost 3 men that night. They lost 4, including Ivan Volov. I know I didn't order the hit myself. My father did before he died, but I inherited the consequences. I've spent the last 5 years building peace, trying to prevent exactly that kind of senseless bloodshed. He looked at her with something akin to wonder. And all this time, I've been falling in love with the daughter of one of those men. The universe truly has a twisted sense of humor. Lorenzo, I should send you away, exile you like I did Marco. It would be the smart play, the safe play. He stepped closer, and now she could see past the anger to the raw emotion that lay beneath. But I'm tired of being smart and safe. I'm tired of letting fear and paranoia dictate my life. You chose me, Nyla. You chose me over your family, over your blood, over everything you were supposed to be. That means something. It means everything, she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Then prove it, he said, his voice softening. Stay with me, not as my employee or my translator or my temporary arrangement. Stay with me as your partner, my equal. Help me build something better than this cycle of violence and revenge. Help me create a world where the children of our enemies don't have to become enemies themselves. Tears streamed down Nyla's face, glistening in the dim light. Yes, God, she choked out, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, I'll stay. I'll help you. I'll do whatever it takes. He gathered her into his arms, cradling her as if she were the most fragile, most precious thing in existence. I love you, Nyla Volov-Thompson, he murmured, his voice rough with feeling. I love your courage, your kindness, and your terrible, wonderful, dangerous honesty. I love that you chose to be better than the world tried to make you. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice. I love you too, she breathed against his chest, her voice trembling slightly. I love you so much it terrifies me. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes searching hers. Good, he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Terror means you're paying. With me as your partner, my equal. Help me build something better than this cycle of violence and revenge. Help me create a world where the children of our enemies don't have to become enemies themselves. Tears streamed down Nyla's face, a testament to the depth of her emotions. Yes, God, she choked out, her voice thick with feeling. Yes, I'll stay. I'll help you. I'll do whatever it takes. He gently pulled her into his embrace, holding her as if she were the most delicate, irreplaceable treasure in the world. I love you, Nyla Volov-Thompson, he whispered, his voice filled with genuine affection. I love your courage, your kindness, and your terribly wonderful, sometimes dangerous honesty. I love that you made the conscious decision to be better than the circumstances that this world tried to force upon you. And I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to proving to you that you made the absolute right choice. I love you too, she breathed against his chest, her voice muffled by his shirt. I love you so much. It terrifies me, to be honest. Good, he responded, pulling back slightly to look her directly in the eyes. That terror means you're paying attention. Terror means you fully understand what's at stake here, but we're going to face it together. No more secrets between us, no more lies. Just us trying our best to be better than we were yesterday. He kissed her then, Right there in the middle of a warehouse still thick with the smell of smoke from the recent battle, surrounded by his men and the remnants of a conflict that had nearly destroyed them both. It was a kiss that tasted of blood and smoke and, most importantly, hope. A promise that they would forge something new and strong from the ashes of their broken and fractured worlds. When they finally broke apart, Lorenzo kept his forehead pressed gently against hers. "We have a lot to figure out, you know," he murmured. "How to effectively handle what's left of Koslov's organization. How to seamlessly incorporate your identity into my world. How to explain to my people that I'm completely and irrevocably in love with the daughter of a man who died fighting against us. We'll figure it out," Nyla stated with more conviction than she actually felt at the moment. "Together. We'll do it together. Together," he echoed, his voice full of unwavering certainty. As they walked out of the warehouse hand in hand, the bright morning sun was finally breaking through the heavy clouds, painting the entire city in beautiful shades of gold and renewed hope. Behind them, the old world burned and crumbled. Ahead of them, something new and promising waited to be built, brick by brick. It wouldn't be easy, that was for sure, and it certainly wouldn't be safe. But it would be real, and sometimes, real was all you truly needed to make things work. 6 months later, Nyla stood in the spacious penthouse, gazing out at the breathtaking Manhattan skyline as the sun slowly began to set over the vibrant city. So much had changed in such a short amount of time since that pivotal day in the warehouse. Koff was now sitting in federal prison, his once powerful organization completely dismantled and absorbed into a cooperative agreement between the remaining factions. Giorgio had been fully reinstated after extensive and delicate negotiations. It turned out that his previously unknown backchannel diplomacy had actually prevented a dozen potential conflicts from escalating. And Nyla had become something she never even dared to imagine. Not just Lorenzo's partner in love, but also in business and in life. She had helped establish a legitimate consulting firm that focused on international negotiations and conflict resolution, effectively using her unique language skills to build bridges instead of enabling violence and destruction. Lorenzo was slowly and carefully pivoting his operations toward legitimate business ventures, using the considerable power and extensive connections he had built for something truly better and more meaningful. It was messy and complicated work, and there were still dangers that they navigated daily, but they were doing it all together as a team. She heard Lorenzo enter the room behind her, and she immediately felt his strong arms wrap around her waist as he gently pulled her back against his chest. "What are you thinking about so deeply?" he murmured softly against her hair. "About how incredibly different life is now," she responded honestly. "And about how incredibly different I am, too. Better?" he questioned gently. "Different?" she clarified. "Not necessarily worse, not necessarily better. Just more honest and more real." She turned in his arms to face him directly. "I got a letter today from my father's old friend in the Brada. He said Ivan would be incredibly proud of what I'm doing. Proud that I finally found a way to honor his memory without becoming the very thing that ultimately killed him." Lorenzo smiled warmly, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead. "Your father sounds like he was a good man trapped in a bad system, just like a lot of us," he said thoughtfully. "Like you," she said. "Like us?" he corrected gently with a knowing look. From the kitchen, they heard the distinct sound of a timer beeping. Dinner was almost ready. Lorenzo had been patiently teaching Nyla to make his mother's famous risotto, and these evening meals had quickly become a beloved tradition, a time when they could both pretend, even if just for a little while, to be a normal couple with normal problems. But they weren't normal. They knew that, and they never would be. But they were theirs, and that was more than enough to make them happy. Later, as they sat together contentedly eating risotto that was almost as good as Lorenzo remembered his mother making, Nyla raised her wine glass in a toast. "To being better than yesterday," she declared with a smile. "To choosing love over fear," Lorenzo added, his eyes sparkling. Their glasses clinked gently together in the soft light of the penthouse, with the entire city spread out beneath them like a vast and endless promise. They continued to build their shared future one choice, one moment, and one honest truth at a time. It certainly wasn't the ending that Nyla had ever imagined when she first walked into that fateful restaurant 6 months ago. But it was so much better precisely because it wasn't really an ending at all. It was just the very beginning of their extraordinary journey together.